Hello, Mechwarriors, and welcome to the Mech Bay, where we fix your mech and fix your game. What's going on, Mechwarriors? I'm your host, Josh. I've got my co-host, Steve, apparently.
Hello.
And Steve, apparently, is also known as Jade Falcon's most humblest son, and he's here with me today. And we have a special guest today. But first, we are the Mech Bay Podcast, your number one source for all things casual to competitive BattleTech. Today, we are pleased to bring on assistant developer Joshua Franklin, better known on the BattleTech forums and Discords as NCKestrel. Thanks for coming on today, Josh.
Hey, glad to be here.
So first off, you're probably wondering where Dustin and Denim are. They're on a special operation, so I couldn't bring them on today, but they'll be on next time. But first, we're going to ask, who's Steve? If you don't know Steve, Steve is the winner of Alpha Strike's Southern Assault 2023, the second place silver medal winner of BTCC Alpha Strike at Adepticon 2023, the tournament organizer of Motor City Mayhem, and an all-around righteous dude. Would you say that's about fair assessment, Steve?
The descriptor of righteous dude may be dubious, but other than that, yeah, you got it right. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Now, Steve's on to help me grill Josh about all things Master Unit lists, Alpha Strike, and the Force Manuals, and whatever else we talk about today, because I needed a little bit of backup for such a high-performing interview. So thanks for coming on today, Josh.
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to be grilled, but we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. So I felt like I could do a decent introduction for you, but I feel like you yourself might have a better introduction because you do so many things involving BattleTech that I probably don't even know all of what you do.
Well, you hit the highlights. Yeah, the assistant developer of Alpha Strike is a new position. And since I've had it, I don't think I've done much with Alpha Strike. Just because we haven't really had anything come up with it since then. But yeah, been with the Master Unit List team for 15 years now almost. And helped write the Alpha Strike rulebook and answer the Alpha Strike rulebook questions. And got involved with the Force Manual, sort of splitting off of both of those. And also been working on campaign stuff from the BattleTech to the Mercs box set campaign, and then the upcoming Hinterlands, Hotspots, and Mech Commander's Handbook, helping with that.
No, that's awesome. I will say my first introduction to you was Dustin saying that you were his first game of BattleTech, really, outside of like his brother. And my second one was me Googling rules questions. And anytime that I found an official answer, it had NCKestrel on the handle on the BattleTech forums. And I was like, this guy is everywhere. He's just answering every question. Who is he? Well, now I know.
Yeah, I spend too much time typing. That is a good summary.
So we like to keep it casual here on the Mech Bay Podcast. So first, I'm going to ask Steve first. Steve, have you gotten any hobby progress done lately?
Well, thankfully, hobby progress is a pretty broad category. As you mentioned, I am running the Motor City Mayhem Alpha Strike tournament taking place May 18th. So most of my creative efforts have gone towards organizing, ordering prizes and shirts and trophies and all sorts of stuff like that. So yes, things have been happening. Model-wise, the last thing I painted was a couple of Helldivers that I 3D printed because I can't help myself.
Because you love democracy.
I do. And, it's not like I don't have enough gray plastic to paint in BattleTech, so I decided to 3D print a little more. So that's what I've been painting. But most of my creative efforts, like I mentioned, are going towards organizing the event and trying to herd cats, as it were.
Understandable. Josh, what about you? Have you gotten anything done hobby-wise?
As non-freelancer work, I've been trying to paint my Northwind Highlanders lance. Ooh. And I've gotten as far as, putting them together and priming them. So
is this the new Northwind Highlander plastic?
Yet. Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, I really wanted that gunslinger. So
I think that's the next pack that I have to pick up. I got the Kellhounds one. I was like, oh man, this isn't enough. I need more.
yeah, and then I started. I was printing off the Aces playtest, so I just finished making all those cards.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was actually hoping to get a game in today, but chores took too long. So
that sounds exactly like my day, where my hobby progress was I cleaned up the gaming room so I could start unloading all of my Alpha Strike terrain so I could start playing some Aces with that. And unfortunately, I spent too long organizing all of my factions into their own bins for the shelves. I'm like, oh man, I need a second whole bin just for Comstar. And then I was like, how do I separate Comstar and Word of Blake? They're the same, but not, but the same. They're the same white. Do they get different bins or the same bin? I was like, so not a lot of hobby progress of actual playing or of painting, but I did at least finally settle on what to buy. I did get all those things I mentioned in the last episode, and then I added in a Spartan from the Snords Irregulars pack.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
Yeah, very weird to look at the Master Unit list of like availability. And I'm like, Comstar, okay, Word of Blake makes sense. Mercenary, and I was like, all mercenaries. I was like, I don't know if I trust that, but but it's fine. I got 2 out of the 3 factions covered.
There you go.
Yeah. So that's it for me. Steve, have you got any games in lately?
So I have been showing up at my local haunt to try to get new players in, and I have terrain and stuff available for people to practice their Motor City lists. I ended up doing a teaching game with a new couple. They came in, husband and wife team. They were a lot of fun to play with, and they ended up picking up some Alpha Strike stuff to participate. I think they've actually signed up for my tournament. But of course, when I meet people and then what people sign up on, there's a discrepancy between their names and their Discord handles. So I always have a little bit of trouble picking out who's who. But they seemed to have a really good time. They were good sports about it. And I didn't actually physically get to play, but I was involved enough to make it count.
You were there in spirit, just a couple feet away.
I was there physically too. I mean, just wasn't rolling the dice.
We don't need to roll dice to have fun.
No, but other than that, no, it's been mostly tournament prep and teaching folks how to play.
Like I said, I very much understand that. All right. Well, Josh, have you got any games in besides your attempt at Aces today?
No, it's not since really the end of the year. I was doing a lot of playtesting for Hinterlands, doing campaign games and playing just whenever I could, and sort of when I finished the playtesting for that, I'm like, I need a break. So this is this getting ready for the Aces playtest is sort of like, okay, yeah, I need to get back to playing.
Shake the dust off.
Yeah, like the only game I played a game of Leviathans because I just needed sort of a break to get away from every BattleTech for a little bit.
It's always good to take a break now and again. You want to avoid burnout because as soon as you start to resent something, I find this a lot when I'm painting. If I'm painting an awful lot of Jade Falcons over and over and over again, I get real frustrated at that yellow. You just got to take a step away, right? Otherwise, you start to hate it. And if you start to hate it while you're doing it, it's just a waste of everybody's time. So it's all right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Come back and get a good running start.
Which factions? I want to assume you're doing all factions in Leviathans, but is there any one of your favorites? We haven't even covered Leviathans yet, but I plan on getting a game in soon.
I really want to play Germans, but I have not actually played as the Germans yet. The last game I actually played against the Germans. Ooh. And I went, and they beat me up badly. And I was like, yeah, that's why I want the Germans. I had the French, and our battleships were charging each other. And I just kept, there was literally nothing of the front of their battleship left, but it wouldn't die. It was just that tough. Like you had to get to another side and start blowing up another side before there was even a chance of it being destroyed. And and my front ship, the front got destroyed, then I turned and the side got destroyed, and I was like, finally, I'm just like, I lost, but so I'm looking toward the French. I was hoping to get my son into it, and he was wanting to play the Italian, so that's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I got. It's gonna be the slowest versus the fastest.
I think I will be the Japanese, but don't think anyone really guessed that coming out of the gate for me.
Are they the Word of Blake of Leviathans?
I don't know. It's just I pick the same faction or genre of faction for each game I do, and I guess obviously they have to be it. So we'll see once I start getting them on, once Leviathans releases and I start playing more people. So
yep.
Yeah. So let's roll into the main subject of today's episode and why we have you on. So we wanted to have Josh on so we could hear all of his thoughts, opinions, and deep dreams about Alpha Strike, Master Unit List, Force Manuals, and anything else he had. So let's start with what I consider you much more the father or driving force behind, and that's Alpha Strike in itself. So how did you get started with Alpha Strike? Because you are, like I said, the main person, or at least were.
So before Alpha Strike, it was called Quick Strike.
Mm-hmm.
And that existed before I even heard of Catalyst Game Labs. So I had been out of BattleTech for a while, since about when MechWarrior Dark Age started. I bought a couple packs from MechWarrior Dark Age and then said, wait a minute, I just spent $30 and got a spider. No, thank you. And
it was a rough time.
So I didn't even know about FanPro and didn't know Catalyst Game Labs yet. And I saw a copy of Strategic Operations on the shelf and saw Battle Force, and I'd enjoyed Battle Force. It was probably 15 years before then. So I convinced myself to go ahead and get it, and in there was 2 pages that said Quick Strike. You mix Battle Force and miniatures rules, and it was just 2 pages of notes that says use these rules from Battle Force and use rules from miniatures rules, and the rest are sort of, that's up to you. And I went to at this point that started getting me interested in Battle Force stats and converting them, and that led to being on the Master Unit List team. And then I went to Gen Con in 2011, and we had some Quick Strike events. And we've been doing the Quick Start cards because we didn't have a Master Unit List website yet. So we did PDFs with the cards, and that was my job, is getting all the stats for those. Chris Marty, Alexander Knight, is sort of the father of Battle Force conversions, and he taught me. And but then, whenever they needed a list of, we need these units for this product, I would collect those stats and format them for them. So I got involved with that. So I went to Gen Con, and they had some quick strike events, and Camo Specs put them on. So those really awesomely painted miniatures and great games. And I left that going, I'm so tired of flipping through multiple different books trying to find the rule. I need the BattleTech rule for this. I need the Battle Force rule for that. So I'm writing out the rule book. And I just started writing it. And it was purely just for my reference when I started it. And I told some people about it. And somebody was in the room when Catalyst was deciding what products they were going to do for the next year. And somebody said, we should do a Quick Strike rule book. And somebody goes, well, Joshua's already writing one.
They outed you.
And I had written a couple technical readout pages. Up to that point was my writing credits. And Herb messaged me, and I didn't even know it had been mentioned to him. And he's like, I hear you're writing a rule book. And I was like, is that a problem? And he's like, there's no house rules in it. I'm like, no, it's just making a reference to all the rules. He's like, great. Can we buy it from you? I was like, sure. And they was like, how far along are you? But basically, Interstellar Operations was on its 4th yearly delay, or however many times it was, and they were
It was
like,
a sad
"Need
time.
something at Gen Con," and we're like, "We can do this fairly quickly," and then they're like, "Oh wait, and you're already writing it." So I didn't, and then while we were doing that, the name changed to Alpha Strike. It flipped to being hex based, and then flipped back to being miniatures based.
Really, I never knew it was hex based for a moment.
It was literally just that brief period of time while it was being, the Alpha Strike rulebook was being written. It was the same announcement that it was going to be called Alpha Strike was when they told me it was going to be hex based. And then after I changed everything to being in hexes, then they said, "Oh no, we're changing it back."
I have to presume this was the birth of the optional rule for hex based. I mean, I assume you just copy and pasted that section over for the optional rule section.
Yeah, I mean, and that probably would have been there anyway. But I mean, like I said, because I was told not to do any house rules, so it wasn't like I was creating from scratch as a miniatures rule game. This was the Battle Force rules that were hex based, and just here tech on miniatures rules, which are based on regular BattleTech, which is hex based. So there wasn't. It was mostly like line of sight questions. Gotcha. Is rules based with hexes rather than, well, look at it. What do you say?
Yeah. You didn't make a like whole fan style rule book and like, this is Alpha Strike, this is how I want to play, and they were like, no. You just collated and organized all the rules that were existing for all the games into one book.
Yeah.
However good or bad they were.
And they're like, "Why is this rule?" And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, the only thing I can tell you right now is that rule is that way because I didn't hate it enough to change it yet. Because many of the rules come from Battle Force or BattleTech and have been adopted into Alpha Strike. And there's plenty that I've changed, and there's some that I've decided not to change. And it's slowly over the years been, I have more and more freedom to do stuff until recently.
And they took it all away from you. That was actually going to be one of my questions for later, is how much leeway did you have when it came to, kind of futzing with the rules? I mean, obviously you told us that you are not allowed to have any custom rules in your book, right? But I mean, what, I guess how much, how tight's the leash, as it were?
Well, when I started, Herb was the line developer, and Herb was very involved in the Alpha Strike rulebook. Like, he was working with me, and then when he got it, he went through an entire pass rewriting sections and saying what to add and everything. And he was very clear. He didn't want to know what I thought it should be. It was follow the rules that are in there. Which, I mean, it was my first time writing. You've got the intern doing the work. You check what they're doing and you tell them to do what they were told to do.
Yeah, because everyone's written multiple rule books and for BattleTech.
Exactly. But then he doesn't have time. He didn't have time then to, line developer doesn't have time to get into answering every rules question that comes up. So since I had put it in there, I started answering all of them, and then I started getting a lot of freedom there where if it needed errata, it needed to be fixed, I just wrote it out and sent it off. And there was not much oversight there. And that was fine for a while because we had maybe 1,000 players. I don't know how many players we had. I'm just making up a number, but it was, not a big important part of the BattleTech universe.
Yeah.
And so we kept making little changes. Somebody would say, "Hey, we need this fixed." Well, we'll fix that. And then, but now, particularly with the tournaments and people making big events out of it, when you have people planning months of advance for something and they're painting miniatures and buying miniatures and preparing, and then, you don't want to go the day before and say, "Yeah, none of that works." Sorry, we changed all that. So at first on my own, I was like, especially with changes to the master unit list, we were like, we need to pay attention to when these are coming up and not make big changes. We'll still fix, if the archer's missing its missiles, we'll still put the missiles back on the day somebody points them out that we missed that. But we're not going to change the rules for conversion. We try not to. I mean, somebody could have a tournament that I don't know about, but we try to pay attention to them. But then recently, it's also gotten into what is the actual purpose behind a new printing of the book, and that it shouldn't be that people have to pour over the whole thing and finding out the game has changed on them. So do not expect the 7th printing, whenever it happens, to have big changes. So we're trying to adjust, because the good thing is that it means more and more people are playing it, and it's a bigger deal than it was, but that also means we're impacting a lot more people. And so we're making plans of how to better to deal with that.
Yeah, because heck, even 5 years ago, there wasn't any product for Alpha Strike out. Like, it was all a digital based, or I mean, there were the rule books, but that was it. Like, it just worked off of Classic. So now you have dedicated Alpha Strike card packs, box sets. Every plastic set comes with Alpha Strike cards, so it's kind of mated with the ongoing releases.
Yep.
I will definitely say, I think that's probably been my view, is I've always seen, or at least because of my time in the BattleTech hobby world, I've always seen, and the people around me have kind of felt this, or at least matched this, that Alpha Strike was always the live service. Like, it gets updates, it's still finding like its foundation, it's there, but it can change like on a 6-month annual basis. Like, not every unit's going to be that price or work that way, or rules interactions aren't the same. But now it seems, I don't want to say slowing down, but I feel like it's finding more of that foundation. Like, the core is there, and now it's just doing the like slight calibration tweaks as we go along.
And it seems to have found its footing, and it's getting that nitty gritty settled.
Yeah, there's still some rough points, but I'm always of the opinion that it's always about trying to do better than it is that, we hit perfection. The master unit list is a great example of that. I try to watch my temper whenever somebody says that, the master unit list has an error. I was like, well, yeah, it lists everything. There's going to be errors.
It's the word of God.
It to? Do you want to flip through technical readout 3025 and point out all the errors in there? But yeah, so when somebody comes and challenges something and says, hey, this doesn't look right, if this rule doesn't make sense, I want to look at it, and I don't want to make an excuse for why we're just going to keep it the way it is. If there was a typo, we're going to fix the typo, not go, well, okay, fine, that's what we said, that's what it is. So there's definitely some things that are still, I want to smooth out and clarify, and we have a plan.
Joshua, when you were talking about having people come at you with errors or perceived errors, I sense a little bit of hostility in your voice. Is there a better way that people can point things out to you? Do you have a preferred method that they bring things to your attention?
No, and it's not hostility. It's I'm often self-depreciating, so I'm like, yeah, we're not perfect. So that's aimed at me, not anybody else. I used to try to point people to the forums. That was almost more of a sanity check. I know where it's supposed to be, but also more importantly to me, that gave me the illusion that somebody else could get it.
You weren't passing the buck. You were just passing them to the possibility that there's bucks there.
Right. It's, well, if I'm sick this week and I'm out and you send it to the master unit list thread, anybody on the master unit list team can get it. Mm-hmm. If you ping me on Discord, all of a sudden now, well, if I don't answer that, then it's not getting answered. But I spend out, particularly on Discord, I spend a lot more time there and a lot more comfortable there. So I've stopped doing that. I used to do that initially. If you don't get an answer from me, then definitely go to the forums, because there are other people that can answer those questions too.
I wanted to, you mentioned something I wanted to talk about. You are very approachable on Discord. And I want to, first of all, thank you for being approachable and giving people quick, definitive responses to rules questions or things like that. I know I've had multiple times at the table you've been able to resolve an issue even before I had a chance to break out the rule book. So I want to thank you for doing that. A lot of people would not take that time or have that dedication to effectively troubleshoot other people's reading errors. So I guess the question for you, along those lines is, is there one rule in particular that you see get broken the most, or that people just get wrong? Are you tired of answering any one specific question?
I have money on this question.
There's one answer coming to mind. I'm sort of checking to make sure that there's nothing else that comes up on top of it. But specifically how tag works.
Tag.
Infamous tag. Yeah, it's always tag.
Even more so than normally people will just say artillery in general. I'll even be more specific and say tag. And that one's totally my own fault. I kept adding things to it, and now there's just a huge, huge mess.
So what is the solution? I mean, is there one? It doesn't have to be left alone, or are there talks with the powers that be to get things kind of streamlined in that regard?
That comes down to when are we going to do it? It will happen. Our artillery will get rewritten. That one's at the top of things, just even to clarify. But I think there will also have to be some changes in that, because it needs to be simpler. Not just more clear, but there's too many options for it. There's too many different ways it works. It needs to find one and stay in its lane.
All right.
I think when I was setting up the MechBay podcast Discord server, I was like, I'm not going to put an Alpha Strike channel, because I know the first question is going to be, how do I artillery? How do I tag? And then I was like, no. And after a few tournaments, I was like, fine, I'll put one there. And I think it was that same day that someone posted, how does tag work with artillery? And I was like, not even 24 hours, people.
It was about 6 seconds later, Josh. I was there when that happened.
I asked the question first.
No, that was not me.
It just automatically, when somebody says artillery, it just puts a link to the same response.
Poor Kestrel sitting here. He gets a shiver down his spine anytime someone talks about tag.
Yeah. I will say, I do love that you, for the last 6th edition errata, that you actually put out like almost a designer commentary that answered the majority of questions. I was like, okay, so Josh understands that we have bad reading comprehension.
Well, and we do that errata document that says this is the changes but those are layout instructions. Mm-hmm. It's change this to this, and sometimes there's no context. Change 1 to 2. But was that important? What did that mean? So that was part of it. Is like the errata document's not going to change, mm-hmm. but maybe it's not necessarily the thing that we need to be pushing towards the players, because it's the layout instructions. And like we have that on the forums too, when people, anybody can post errata to the errata thread, but then we're always like, you got to put it in the right format. You got to put it in the right, because that's for the layout people. I mean, Dak is wonderful doing all the layout for the BattleTech books, and he's not just a layout person. He knows BattleTech.
Yeah.
But it's still a lot for him to expect to be the expert on everything, every book that we we do errata for. That he does not need to try to figure out the context of what you meant when he's doing the errata. So it has to be in a specific format, and it's not. I don't want to put long-winded, here's the explanation for why we did this in his instructions. The players want to know, what was the point of, why did you change 1 to 2?
Yeah.
Well, this is why it needs to do this. So, yeah.
I will say
I really like doing this. I always worry that they're too boring.
They're very technical, but I will say they are probably the best errata that I've seen out of all of the war games I go to. Like, I can Control F. Okay, I'm looking for changes to tag, and it pops up like tag change to from this to this, and I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I need to know. Like, it changed from something to something.
Yeah, not only are they clear, but they also show an intent of what it was supposed to be. So any other ambiguities in that area, you kind of go, oh, this is how this is supposed to work. So I agree. I think those errata logs are incredibly helpful.
What was the one we set a standard for how to do division? Like, it used to be reduce by half, reduce to half, subtract half, and then you had different, sometimes round up, sometimes round down. It was like, what am I doing today? So there was 200 entries of replace this wording with reduce to half, round up. But I had to do it every single time it was in the book for the errata document. And there's I don't know how many of them there were. But yeah, the player doesn't need to know all 100 instances of that. You just need a line that says, yeah, we standardize. It's always reduce it to the half.
What has been your favorite change or your, I guess, fingerprint on Alpha Strike besides the core of the rulebook? Something that you've really pushed for that maybe the higher ups were like, oh, I don't know, and you were like, no, I think this is really how it needs to be. That you've been like, this is the part that I'm most proud of.
Question. That is a good question. Because my first thought is one that hasn't happened yet.
Oh, he's a tease. I knew he was.
It's terrible.
Well, I'll even say what it is. I really want front-loaded initiative. So
I played with it for the first time this year, and I've never gone back.
Yeah. I actually... Andrew Kroll had asked me about it. They did something slightly different where they just held one unit at the end. So there's always 1-to-1 as the last pair. And I was like, okay, I get conceptually what you're talking about, but I don't know how to write a rule that says that. There's so many different ways. So I was like, let me think about it. And then I was like, I'm afraid I'm going to break something. This is a rule that's been in BattleTech since Battle Droids. I don't know why they do it this way. So we have a rules team group for BattleTech, not just Alpha Strike, but all of BattleTech. And I asked them, why do we do initiative with everything waiting to the end? And nobody could figure it out.
It's because that's how I've always done it.
Yeah, the sacred text.
Yeah, we were all, I was asking around all over the place. And everybody was just like, I don't know. That's the way we do it. Somebody brought up the one concern, which is still there, of the possibility that on the first move, if you get to move multiples, being able to trap somebody when you get to, having your proto-mech swarm and they all jump around the dasher on their first move because they get to move 3 and now the dasher can't move.
I hate to say I haven't done that, but I have thought about that. Like, oh man, I actually want to move first to hopefully pin something down. But I think I did the math, and I was like, the chance of me ever doing that is just so slim. It's not.
But the fact that you thought about it, Josh, shows that you're a bad person.
I learned how to Protomech from Creekfire, and I'm pretty sure Josh's post on the forums of how to use Protomechs.
Yeah, then the possibility of transports being able to dump multiple infantry to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So, but none of those were the reason why it was originally set that way. So I took a while asking people around, and nobody could figure it out. So it's going to happen eventually. It's just a matter of once you have an idea, then you have to actually find the product and timeline, producing it and everything of when it's going to happen.
No, that sounds awesome.
I'm trying to figure out which ones are already there. Because some have had the initial idea, but then Herb did most of the Alpha Strike Companion.
I've been reading that the last couple of days, and the errata. I think I saw a post like, "Is there going to be a new compendium out?" No, everyone was like, "It's just more errata than book now."
There's probably 2 in there that were my ideas. Like Herb wrote them, he put it in there, but it was sort of like backwards, where most of the Alpha Strike rulebook I didn't actually come up with them, but I wrote it. There were several in the companion that were my ideas, but Herb wrote them and put them in the book. And that was the movement modes and multiple attack rolls being in. Though it took a while for us to get all the circumstances of multiple attack rolls covered.
Sure. So speaking of, right, I find that in 99% of the games that I've played, multiple attack rolls is the default. Is it simply a holdover from, the original quick strike rules that multiple attack rolls was not the standard rule set?
There's 2 things there. One is that there is a sizable minority that do use single attack rolls still. And so it's sizable enough that I don't think we're just going to dump them.
Well, sure. I mean, if people want to play the way that's fine, right? There's no problem with it. But I guess my question is, it's drafted that multiple attack rolls is the optional rule as opposed to the default.
So that comes down to, I'm a freelancer, so I can't tell them I'm going to write a new rule book. I have to convince them to write a rule book. And if I just go, hey, we're going to write a new rule book to make multiple attack rolls to default, they're like, no, that's not a product. But it would take a sizable rewrite. It wouldn't just be move this paragraph to this page and move that paragraph to where that one was supposed to be. You'd have to go through the entire rule book and finding everywhere that multiple attack rolls should be and isn't, instead of all being in its own separate section. So then maybe some point we'll do that. I'm not sure. Like that would then also have to get into other people's opinions on what should be default. I was lucky. I was glad I got to throw in multiple attack rolls into the Alpha Strike box set without anybody objecting, because we generally didn't want to include optional rolls, but I was like, no, I got to put that one in there.
No. I've played single attack roll. My first introduction to Alpha Strike was with multiple attack roll, and then I was like, okay, this is fine. Like, this feels like BattleTech. Then single attack roll. I was like, this makes sense if you're doing the large scale battles that it looks like the book is kind of like pushing you towards. And then I learned about multiple damage roll, and I was like, no, I don't like this one. I'll take anything else.
Yeah, we don't talk about multiple damage rolls. It's the redheaded stepchild of damage allocation.
I think there has been a surprise since Alpha Strike or Quick Strike was first created compared to now. I think there's been quite a bit of surprise or unexpected results of people playing smaller battles with Alpha Strike than necessarily was the original vision.
So
I've definitely
point value.
taken more. I've definitely taken more units in Classic some days than I do in my Alpha Strike games, and I'm like, I feel like I'm doing it backwards, but we're just gonna roll with it and see how it lands.
Yeah, so like the rule book had those sample companies, and that was sort of like, that was more of, this is sort of like the floor. This is where you start, is with companies and get larger.
Yeah.
And I think also part of that is that Alpha Strike wasn't originally, at least not top of mind, as a tournament game. I mean, BattleTech is not. I mean, there are people that play BattleTech as tournaments. I'm not saying they're wrong or anything, but
I'm wrong. It's okay.
It wasn't naturally a tournament game.
No.
There's just people that love it enough that want to beat each other up over it. Alpha Strike was intended to appeal to miniatures gaming players. And I think tournaments, or sort of that pickup play, is a natural extension of that, but wasn't necessarily at the top of our mind when we were making Alpha Strike, that this is for that. And it was very much well, you can have larger battles than you can in Classic, was I think more of it. It was more of a vision of, big long table at the convention where you have these huge armies fighting each other. But I'm thrilled with it. I'm glad that it's doing it, and I do think it's a natural extension of where it was aimed. When you start talking about miniatures wargaming, there's going to be a lot more of that type of play. But I think it took a while for the rulebook to catch up with it.
Yeah. No, I definitely love more miniatures, more gaming, more fun. Like Alpha Strike really lets me put as many toys as I want. Like, I don't have to be like, oh, I'm only going to play one game of BattleTech this month. I could play Classic and put 4 on the table, or I could put like 12 or 18 on with Alpha Strike. I get to use the weird infantry and tanks and everything all at once, and it's normal there.
Yeah, I think the largest game that we'd ever done was a 9-on-1. Everyone got 1,000 points or something like that, and it was just a huge brawl that took several hours. But it was a great time, and it wouldn't have been anywhere remotely possible with Classic, right? You had to use Alpha Strike for it, but the system is really nice to allow those larger scale battles that I think people read the fiction and they want to do. Right. I mean, people are excited and they want to play those big battles of, Coventry or, Twycross and stuff like that. You just can't do it without setting aside 12 hours in Classic.
Or like Josh said, being able to get more of the other non-mech units in without feeling like you're having to drop the mechs. Look, I can bring 8 tanks and all the infantry they can carry and all this other stuff and not go, oh my God, this is going to be all night.
They die just as fast with the same levels of rules as anything else on the table.
I joked with somebody that I think I really wish I could see Ironwind Metals sales data, because I'd like to see how much Alpha Strike has influenced how much their non-mechs. So
I will say the majority of my non-mech and probably infantry collection is exclusively because I started playing Alpha Strike more regularly.
I want to see the sales of that Tortoise battle armor spike for those couple months and then drop off the list.
What's the other big one, Steve? Oh man, there were
Tortoise 2s.
There were Tortoise 2s. I was there for when they were hot, and I was there the day that I saw the master unit list change. And
so the day those point values went up for a lot of that battle armor was a very good day. I know a lot of people didn't like the change, but it was nice to know that someone would at least pay a little more for bringing those monsters on the field.
We had actually been testing that change for more than 6 months.
Oh wow!
It was ready about a month beforehand, and I was like, that was when I was like, no, I can't do it right now, right before. But then we had think the Las Vegas Open was the next big one. I think Adepticon was later.
Yeah, because Southern Assault is in November, and I want to say LVO is next in, I want to say January.
Late January, yeah. I think, I rushed to get it out to have as much of a buffer between as much of a chance for people to adjust to it as they could before the next one. So yeah, we had it all lined up, ready to go, and I waited to push the button until afterwards.
That's really funny because, the way that I had perceived that, right, we just come off of Southern Assault. Tortoise 2s made a lot of people very unhappy. Then almost immediately thereafter, the rules changed and they got updated. It's like, oh, people are listening to what's happening at Southern Assault. This is great. We're getting our feedback is making it back. But it looks like you guys had that in the pipe for quite a while already. So,
yeah, because I don't remember. I know there have been some other tournaments, but I think even the first Southern Assault might have had some issues with it. But yeah, I certainly y'all had McBay had a great summary after the previous ones, so I definitely listened to them because I did not get to go to them. So,
well, you got to visit this year. Next year, we'll get you rolling dice. Whether I have to bring the dice and models for you.
I even had my Kestrel Grenadiers painted.
Oh.
They were ready to go. I couldn't commit both days, so I was like, yeah, I'll just go hang out. But this year, hopefully, more planning time, and I am planning to play this time.
That'll be great.
Maybe even Nova.
Ooh, sounds even better. Well, I don't want to.
If I can get it right.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't want to take all of your time up just talking about Alpha Strike because you do a little bit more than that. But I will end on what is your goals for the future of Alpha Strike? Because right now I want to say it's in a great place. People are playing it. People are buying products specifically for Alpha Strike. There's a lot of discussion about Alpha Strike. But where is it going? Do you have an end goal, or is there an end goal that Catalyst wants to envision it as?
Sure. So I think there's three main goals. One is we need to get Alpha Strike support in everything BattleTech. So the force packs have the cards. Whenever there's a campaign book that comes out, because in the vast majority of cases, we're not going to split the lines and make, okay, here's the BattleTech turning point, here's the Alpha Strike turning point. But there is a huge gap in the number of writers, playtesters that have BattleTech experience over the last 40 years and the number of ones that have Alpha Strike experience. And also just having standards. Like we've been working on, okay, writers know how to say which map sheets a scenario should use. We need to give them directions for how to say how the Alpha Strike terrain is set up because they don't know what to do. Not only do they not necessarily, maybe they haven't played Alpha Strike themselves, but we also just don't have a template or a guideline built up. So we've been working on that. So throughout the line, just making sure Alpha Strike gets supported along with classic BattleTech. The other thing is I do want a rewrite of the core rulebook. Not necessarily to introduce a whole bunch of rules changes, but so that first Alpha Strike rulebook came out. When was that? That was 2013?
Yeah, about then.
I and nobody else have ever had a contract to rewrite the rulebook since then. So even when Alpha Strike Commander's Edition came out, it was, we're going to rearrange the old Alpha Strike rulebook and the Alpha Strike Companion and pull some stuff in and mix them together. And we made some changes, but they were all spots. Like I was literally told initially, we're going to make a new Alpha Strike rulebook. You have a week. Let us know whatever changes you want to make. And I was like, oh, we'll do this. And then it dragged over months. And then Ray would come back to me and go, do you have anything else you really want to do with Alpha Strike? And I'd mention, let's fix aerospace. And we'd spend a week. Fortunately, Scott Roberts, had some ideas that he had already been talking about for aerospace, and that's why I mentioned it when Ray brought it up. So it wasn't like we came out of the blue in 1 week and said, let's do this with aerospace. But it was very much that attitude of it's immediate, you have to do it right now. There was no let's think about this and do the whole rule book. It was patches. So there's a lot of, why is this special ability in this optional section? Well, because that's where it was in the old rule book. And also, we need a whole section at the beginning of setup of what point value do you bring? How big is the play area? What terrain goes on it? The rulebook right now assumes basically you start by rolling initiative. You've already got the game, go. And it's a reference book, but we really don't tell people how to set up a game. And we started that with the Alpha Strike box set. And that one actually has our general ideas of how we want it to start. It says what point value to be at. Here's how you set up the game and everything. But we need to do that with the main rule book as well. And so that's going to be a while. It's not going to be within a year. It's going to be longer, but that's a goal. And then the major thing is going to be ACEs, as far as an actual Alpha Strike product. Do you all know what that is? I assume I probably have to explain for a lot of other people. But
from what I know, ACEs is the single-player version of BattleTech. It's the solo BattleTech miniatures game.
PvE. Yeah.
PvE, yeah.
Yeah. PvE, AI type, the enemies have pre-programmed instructions that they will follow.
I have wanted for a long time. Years ago, Ray asked me what would be my ideal project I'd want to work on for BattleTech, and I said I want to do a co-op BattleTech game. Each player has a mech, and we throw hordes of enemies at them. Or it's a BattleTech, so maybe just the same number of enemies. But because they won't let me throw hordes of infantry in a box. But
no, that's what I want. I want my horde of infantry in a box. Catalyst, if you're listening, just give me like a dozen conventional infantry. They're teeny little 6mm infantry. I will imagine what they have. They could just be little sticks. It doesn't matter at this point.
So, but yeah, I told Ray that's what I really want. And he kept saying, okay, maybe later. We got to do this. We got to do that. And then Lynn Vander developed ACEs, which is this. It's a deck of cards. So it's role based. So your sniper hopefully acts like a sniper, and your juggernaut charges in there and starts being upfront and personal with everybody. But it's random. So you flip over the card, and the card. So there's some variety. So it's not just you always know the juggernaut's going to charge straight at you.
Yeah.
The sniper is not going to just stand still all the time, and you already know ahead of time what it's going to do. And so they've been working on that for a year or so, but we're actually going to make it a box.
Oh, really?
It's
Awesome.
going to be an ACEs box. And fortunately, all of this they have said, so I'm not leaking anything, but it's going to have miniatures. It's going to have a campaign, and it's going to have the ACEs deck. And basically, it's going to be expansion to the Alpha Strike box set. It's more miniatures, more stuff, more games to play with it. So I'm looking forward to it, both because the AI gives new ways of playing that I think a lot of people are interested, but also just it's going to be more of the Alpha Strike stuff.
Are you privy? I mean, you may not be able to tell us even if you are, but are you privy to kind of the changes that have been made? Because I know we had access to ACEs if you did the Kickstarter. They gave you kind of the alpha version or maybe beta version, whatever version it was in of the ACES program. Do you know how much has changed since then? Or do you think it's going to resemble basically what it was that we accessed through the Kickstarter?
They have gone through a lot of refinements. I don't want to spoil their work. They have every Friday night, they have a stream, Six Sides of Gaming does Friday Night Aces, and they tease some of the changes they're making there. But it's not my work, so I don't want to steal
That's
their
fair.
thunder. But there have been significant revisions to what that original playtest was.
Yeah, because that was originally for Classic, so them porting it.
No, it's for Alpha Strike.
Originally? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Maybe I missed.
They have mentioned recently they've just started looking into, they want to do Classic, but the Classic side of it's more
It's because I
complicated.
did, when I was on for the Six Sides of Gaming Friday night, they had me and Denim on with Big Red, and we did Classic, so that's probably why my brain's like.
I think that might have been like the first time.
Okay, that explains it then.
They did Classic.
No, I swear, the first time I did it was Classic. Yes, Josh, you were the first one.
Josh on the cutting edge.
I know. No, that's all.
Yeah, they weren't going to do Classic until you showed up. But yeah, so those three things mostly is making sure Alpha Strike is in everything and it's well supported, and then long term that rulebook and then the ACES will be the main Alpha Strike product that's coming out specifically for Alpha Strike.
Awesome. That'll be great to get my 7th edition rulebook with artillery and fixed, and then I can play solo all by myself and artillery myself.
So Josh, you
Just in case
mentioned
anybody calls on me later, I don't think the 7th, I think there will actually be a name change.
Okay.
Oh wow.
Whenever we make significant changes. I don't think the 7th printing will be that. That's why I'm saying it's a long-term goal.
Gotcha.
You mentioned
we will run out of books before then.
You mentioned as part of that long-term goal, kind of establishing almost a baseline ideal point value or map size. Are you able to kind of give us a hint as to what maybe even what you think as opposed to an official stance? What do you think that should look like?
This will be going on not just for Alpha Strike, but for regular Classic BattleTech as well. That the idea of formats and how do people play. It won't be singular. Mech Commander's Handbook is going to sort of be the how you do narrative campaign play. Here's the format for that. They've talked about having a tournament book. I have not heard anything other than a tournament book is something they want to do at some point. But then I think in the main rule books themselves, there's going to be some basic pickup play standards. And it's going to be multiple. So it's like I'm looking at something like, here's a skirmish level, here's a battle level.
Yeah.
You know, if it's 250 PV or 500 PV, whatever those values end up being when they tell me I'm wrong and we need to do something else. But that's what playtesters are for.
Yeah, even the big war games, not every game is always on like a 4x6 table. It's like, no, if you're doing the small, just entry level, just here's a 2-foot by 2-foot square. So,
but there will be something in there also about, I really want to try to get, particularly with Alpha Strike, people actually using not the formation types, but the organization. People actually bringing lances, stars, level 2s. So we've been working about how to get that without making this a master's thesis level work for building an army, which is why I was specifying I'm not talking about formation types, because that's where so far we have hit that wall. That was too much.
Because me and Steve have both done that for BTCC, where that was our first like introduction. Like, okay, no, you are required to take a lance. You are an inner sphere. Or in his case, he was clan and I was also clan. So it was like, if you want to run this, you got to take 5. And I was like, oh, I have to. It's like,
it gets
yes.
expensive real quick. Yeah, you're like, oh, I can tell. No, I don't have enough points for this. This is problematic.
Yeah, this changes the game completely rather than just pick cards or go to master unit list and assign units. Like, no. You have to take them and they have to be like a battle lance or battle star. I was like, oh no, I can't just take all dashers. I have to follow the guidelines in the book.
Right. Well, and the other thing is those formation bonuses really do lend a lot of flavor to those formations when you finally build them, right? Because the special abilities they earn really do, lend themselves to function the way that they ought to on the battlefield.
Yeah, that's been the requirements of those have been a pain point that we're looking at, and there's a lot of theories and not a lot of consensus yet.
Sounds pretty not familiar. Let's see. I feel like I hear that a lot nowadays.
As the youths say, let them cook.
Wow. But let's get into some of your master units time, because I knew you were part or involved in master units when I learned about you and your roles, but you've really taken on much more of an importance in that in the last couple of years. Like, you've been involved and then you seem to be the person for master unit lists. What goes into master unit lists as like a resource, the team, the time? Like, is that like a full day job going through all the entries?
That's a good question, because the perception's a little different than how it actually works, in that I actually used to do a lot more with the master unit list before, as far as doing the updates, being involved in the data. I have tried to move further away from that just because I have so many other things to do, and partially burnout. There's only so many times you can argue over how many Wolverines the Federated Sons has. But Matt Larson Sartris has been doing, probably for the past more than a year, I don't know how long, couple years, has been doing most of the actual labor for the master unit list. Like, whenever the rec guides came out, collecting all the data, what all do we need to put in it? And that sort of changed over years as we've burned through people. So that's been a revolving. So I do the Alpha Strike conversions. I'm a little more involved in still. We do have a lot more automation tools than we used to.
I do like the automation tools, at least the tools on the tools tab on master unit list.
Oh no, I mean in the Megamech and Mordel's site, being able to convert new units. So whenever the rec guides come out, it's not all by hand. We still check, but now I'm looking at the conversion list from Megamech and Mordel, comparing them and going, okay, that doesn't look right, or yeah, that looks right. And so we still have to have that human looking at it to make sure. Fortunately, the rec guides were fairly traditional. They weren't coming up with new unit types or something like that, where it's throwing you from a complete loop. Like, no, we've never done a mobile structure before. What is this? So, and both of those, Mordel and Megamech, have been very responsive, so that every time we did see an issue, they had it fixed within days. So I still do the spot checks for those, but most of the faction availability, I usually leave myself out of the conversation at this point. Most of the time, actually, I'm like the lore master for the master unit list. Like, why did we not give availability to this faction 10 years ago? And I'm like, oh, I got that email here.
Okay.
Or somebody will go, why didn't we do this? Or should we change this? And I'm like, oh, let me bring the conversation we had about this already. Here it is. Feel free to tack on your comments onto what was discussed then. But yeah, so I've gotten a little further away from it than I used to. It used to be even before there was a site, we just had an Excel spreadsheet, and I was maintaining the Excel spreadsheet.
Oh, gosh.
The old days.
Yeah. But, yeah, we got some great people on the team. Some of that don't get mentioned a lot. Chris Marty, Alexander Knight taught me how to do Alpha Strike unit versions back when I was only Battle Force. But he's also the only one that knows how in the world strategic battle force and abstract combat system, whatever the S stands for. So he's the only one that does those. Whenever we need those for a book, like whenever we did BattleTech and did those, the strategic battle force in there, I was like, you tell me what you want to put in there because I don't have a clue. And there's a lot of people that are in there for specific backgrounds. Like Luke Robertson is a huge Ghost Bear fan, but he just knows everything about all of the clans. So he did, he's also aerospace. He was before the Master Unit List team existed, there was an aerospace cabal, is what they called it. That was going to, and they're still waiting, that one day Cadets is going to make a book that updates warships and all of drop ships to the current standards.
I keep buying them. I keep waiting. That's all I can say.
But yeah, so one thing we do have going is that we're trying to get a new version of the site. Josh Perrion is leading that, as handling the project management itself of there being a new site. So I don't know much about it other than I'm going to play tests and do QA on it as much as I can when they let me see it.
Do you know if it's going to incorporate some better functionality? Not to say that Master Unit List isn't a fantastic resource. You guys haven't done a killer job with it, but there are, I'm sure you're aware, there are tons of third-party tools out there like Jeff's BattleTech tools and other Alpha Strike builders that allow a little bit better indexing and sorting for certain, weapon types or modes or special abilities or, movement, things like that. Is that being discussed for the new Master Unit List website to be included?
There's always discussion. And that's one of the goals of the new site, is then to be able to continue development. I think when we first see it, it'll probably be more of just duplicating what's there. There might be some changes, but the first goal will be release a new website that we can then develop and we have more control over. George created the current Master Unit List website, and I mean, he did it all on his own. It was all his. He wanted to do it. He did it, and it's been huge for us. It's been huge for BattleTech and Catalyst. But he did it as a volunteer 10 years ago, however long it was. And that's a long time to volunteer as a software developer. Yeah. So, and he's moved on to doing other things in his life. So it's not like this used to be more related to what his day job was. And so it was more of like, yeah, I'm working on my skills and stuff. And he's gone to do other stuff. And he's like, yeah, now if you need a change, I got to go pull up different dev environment.
Oh, no.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So we need a new site just to get it to where we now have the developers that are working on it and stuff like that. So that's why whenever there's something wrong with the Master Unit List site and it's down or something, I simultaneously don't want people to slam on the developer because it's not his fault.
Is that
complaining about software 10 years after somebody wrote it that it's not meeting current demands? It's like, it's not his fault.
Right.
He's the reason why there is this huge demand for it.
Yeah.
These outages,
simultaneously, the company needs to do something about it.
I was going to say these outages you mentioned, right? How big? Let me back up. These outages you mentioned, how much of that is caused by these third-party tools we just talked about? Are they, skimming or ripping the information off from mass units? Is that what causes those outages, or is it something else?
I don't have that information.
I thought it too. Yeah.
Yeah. It certainly seems to be based on demand, but I don't know. I can't divide out, is that demand coming from, is this Josh's fault or not? I don't know.
It could be my fault because I'm pretty sure if I go to my history just for today, how many times was I in Master Unilist just today? Let's find out.
The real question is, how many tabs did you have open at the same time?
I do it on mobile. That's the worst part.
Oh, no. When I'm list building, I've got 300 tabs open trying to decide between the A and the F and the H version of whatever I'm looking at, right?
I've got 125 just for today. 234 for the weekend. Yeah, so blame Josh is indeed the problem.
Well, at this point, it's even where it's not even just the players being inconvenienced. There are parts of Catalyst production now that depends on the master unit.
Oh, wow.
Oh, gosh.
Right.
Well, when somebody's making a force pack and they're doing the cards, and then they message me, hey, the master unit list is down. Where's my stats? I'm like, oh, yeah, let me get those for you. It's just been such an amazing tool. But yeah, we haven't been able to do new features for a long time. So there's a huge long list of things that we would like it to do.
Well, I'm glad that is in the future for Master Unilist, because that is a tool that I did not know about when I was getting started in BattleTech. Like, I knew about MegaMech and think I knew about Mordell, at least from other people talking, but Master Unilist was one that nobody really was like, oh no, this is the main resource that we go to, because it was at that time the Alpha Strike one. But now it's like, no, I go to Alpha Strike daily, hourly. Boss is threatening me levels of like, Josh, get off Master Unilist. It's like, no, make me. It's perfect.
Yeah, like we've talked about for a while now is having record sheets for classic BattleTech. That's a goal.
Oh boy.
So there are lots of plans. Just so everybody knows, I expect the initial thing to be more of, okay, get it to replicate what it does now initially.
Even just faster. That's all I want. I want more availability. Me hitting like search for units with tag, search for unit with stealth and tag. Like, give me that faster, more. I don't have a problem. I swear.
Oh, I'm trying to remember. There's one that, like, if you search for it, you actually get another one because it's the same letter, just a couple extra letters. I can't remember what it is now.
Is there one part of Master Unilist that you know about and just everyone that's using it doesn't know about, that there's like a feature that you wish was more widely known?
Some people know this. I don't know how widely known it is, but if you can click on, when you go to a unit and it shows the Alpha Strike card, there's a little button there for customize, and you can enter in the skill right there and then adjust the card. It puts the skill on the card and adjusts the point value.
What?
So if you just need that one unit,
my God, he's not even lying. I'm doing it right now. Look at that. That's amazing.
I'm so mad right now.
And of course, now every tournament's going to be mad at me because you can edit anything on that card.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to make it part of you can go to the force builder and of course add bunches of units and then adjust all of them.
That's how I do it, but I want to know, like, okay, how much, without memorizing the skill increase table up and then down, like, all right, if I increase my avatar at 40 PV up, like, what is it? No, I can just do it on that page. It's so much easier.
And someday I will be able to banish all the generalists.
You don't care for the general lists?
We actually did not have general lists. They didn't exist. When we had the Excel spreadsheet, we marked every single faction. So if every single Inner Sphere house had it, we marked Draconis Combine, Federated Sons, all of them. The first release of the master unit list to the public was a PDF. And in layout, they said, we cannot fit all these factions on here. So the Inner Sphere general list was this layout saying, instead of listing all the Inner Sphere factions, we're just going to put Inner Sphere general. And instead of listing all the clans, if it's all of them, we'll just say Inner Sphere clan general. So the master unit list team never said this unit belongs to the Inner Sphere general list. It was a layout shortcut. And then when George made the master unit list website, I didn't even know there was going to be a website until he had created it. And he based it off the PDF initially. So he created the general lists just as they were on the PDF. And they have caused me many, many headaches since then.
Do you think those will be renovated for the new website and you're going to do away with them entirely? Or do you think that's now cemented in how things function?
This is currently just my pet peeve. I hate the general lists. So there's not currently any plans to change them.
Did you know that in the Civil War era that the Warhawk is available to every faction in the entire Inner Sphere?
I didn't know that.
I was like, this doesn't. And then it's not available to anyone except Scorpion Empire. And I was like, this doesn't. How could it be everywhere and then nowhere? This doesn't make sense. But no,
So can we talk about the force manuals now?
We can talk about the force manuals now,
because the force manuals exist just to deal with that. So the master unit list just has yes or no for availability.
Mm-hmm.
And by what era? Did we put it for the Civil War era, right?
Yep.
It's where that after the Smoke Jaguars are annihilated, every Inner Sphere house now in field manual updates has regiments that are 10% clan tech, 15% clan tech, and they're all over the place.
Yep.
But the master unit list was saying nobody had any clan mechs in the Inner Sphere. So we had to. So I argued we need to put some on there, and they're going to be the common Smoke Jaguar ones.
Oh, everyone gets their piece of the pie.
Exactly. We took clan tech and we took the Smoke Jaguars clan tech and we just gave it to everybody. Now we picked some specific ones. We said here's the ones the Smoke Jaguars had as the most common for each of their weight classes, and we picked like one second line and one or two front line. But the master unit list can't say the faction has it, but doesn't have many of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it says, the Capellan Confederation has the same access to the Warhawk as it does to Victor's.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah.
So I actually proposed what at the time was the faction point system in the combat manuals was originally a proposal for the master unit list. I said, I want to come up with a system that has more granularity than, yes, you can build a Federated Sons force that's all dire wolves. Go for it.
No, I swear it's lore accurate.
Exactly. So that's how I got involved with the combat manuals, which the idea is these are the faction source books, how to build an army for this faction. And the faction points, which were basically, it costs nothing if your faction produced it.
Yeah.
It costs faction points, and you only get a limited number of them to get salvage from an enemy. And it cost a little bit less if it was something sold to you by a friendly state. If you're in the FedCom and you're building a Davion force,
yeah,
you can get some Merrick units, but they shouldn't be your entire force. Merrick was selling to you in the clan invasion, but you don't have all Merrick mechs. But it was too much math. We hate math. Ray in particular hates math.
Oh.
He's always telling me, is there math in this? And I go, maybe.
We're BattleTech players. We're addicted to math. I can't help it.
And charts. Math
No,
and
we
charts.
want tables.
Yeah.
Oh,
Not math. We want tables. Lots and lots of tables. But so with the force manuals, when we were talking about rethinking them, we've come up with a different system. Every unit will get individually tagged as either iconic, common, uncommon, or rare for that faction that it has. If it doesn't have it, then no, we're not. Got to keep the page count down somehow.
I was about to say, there's a lot of units, sir. Especially just in that time period. There's a lot of them. So how...
This is why I have Matt doing all the work. When I was saying he was doing all the work for the master unit list, I also made him do all this work.
So I need to have Matt on next. Good to know.
No, he doesn't have time.
We've let him out of his aunt shackles occasionally, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it also fixed one of the other confusions the master unit list has always had, in that technically, by rule, the master unit list doesn't list salvage.
Yep.
Unless a source book specifically says so. So if the source book says House Davion has ravens, then we list it. But if it doesn't mention they have panthers, then we don't list it. Even though clearly they should have some panthers as salvage as well. So in the force manuals, we're not including every possible salvage option, but we are including options for salvage and what availability you should have for them. So we can list that, in the late clan invasion, we don't get into civil war in the force manuals, but we can list that the House Davion has probably some gladiators. I can't remember which clan mechs they might have. What would Jade Falcon one? Let's make it a Hellbringer. They probably have some Hellbringers.
Just a couple.
Yeah. The ones that survive combat somehow.
Oh. Everyone knows. I'm sorry. Hellbringer.
But yeah, so I'm really looking forward to hopefully seeing players actually using that system more so than the faction point system. We'll see how that goes.
Sorry, so which system do you want more, the faction point system or the...
No, the force manuals. What it does is so it's sort of roughly based on the rule of two that tournaments have been using.
Mm-hmm.
So if something's uncommon, that's sort of like the default rule of two. But also there's a limit that you can't have more than a third of your force be uncommon.
Makes sense.
So you can have a scattering of common. You can have up to 4 of them, and your whole force can be common. In iconic, there's no limit. You're Planet Draconis Combine, and you want Panthers and Jenners. Yeah, they have them all.
Yeah.
Your whole force can be Panthers and Jenners. I don't care if you're building a regiment. Go for it. Slight exaggeration, but so it gets into that granularity. Rare, you can only have one of, and literally you can only have one rare. So we can then get into listing some stuff like, yeah, your Davion Force can have a Hellbringer, or it can have a Vindicator's not rare. I think the Vindicator's probably uncommon, even as salvage for for Davion. Trying to think of a Capellan mech that would be maybe a
catapult.
There we go. But they probably have catapults. But the Arrow 4 catapult.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is this is kind of like a random assignment table, but reimagined, right? Just presented maybe in a different way.
It's not random. But it does get into where we can list things, and we say you have a Warhawk, a Hellbringer, a Chimera, a Stealth, all these things available as salvage, but they're all rare. You can have one of them. Your force needs to have some actual Davion units in it.
Yeah. Some troopers, some line units.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, the only things you can have in mass are ones that are really mass produced by your faction. Davion can have a lance of Valkyries. They probably, unless you're getting into a specific regiment that says they have them, you can't have a lance of Goliaths. You can have Goliaths, but you can't build an entire force of Goliaths unless, you are Cochrane's Goliaths. You're thinking about that one?
I am thinking about that one. I was thinking of that one, the Highlanders, Northwind Highlanders. I was like, so I guess I would hope the Northwind Highlanders could take all Highlanders and be okay. Hopefully.
We haven't gotten to that one, but I doubt it.
Yeah.
I doubt they would be that many of them.
So while doing some research for this, we got combat manuals, and they were just for Alpha Strike originally, right?
Yeah, we were sort of forced. Well, I feel I was forced into that. I think other people were fine with them being Alpha Strike only.
And now we have...
The support wasn't there in Classic yet. So it literally wasn't even an option because campaign operations was not out. So a lot of the things that the combat manuals were expanding on didn't exist in Classic BattleTech yet. But we knew we were planning to do it. But we had to make the books now. So you can't make the books now referring to a rule book that doesn't exist yet.
Can't build the cart without inventing the horse first kind of situation.
Yeah, we couldn't figure out which page references to put.
That'll do it.
They determine everything. But yeah, so there. I don't want to say that nobody wanted them to be an Alpha Strike book. I think the idea was that Alpha Strike needed them.
Just add a little bit more flavor at the time, or
and that we were trying to get more players in, and those players were used to those kind of books.
Yeah.
And we're going to constantly ask, where are they? And bringing in new players to BattleTech and then throwing 15,000 units at them and going, no, really, anybody can have any of those except for if that force you brought, no, nobody. That's just ridiculous. So we really needed to have some way to bring people in that was still BattleTech, but gave them some how to filter that down to something useful that wouldn't get you laughed out of the game store.
Aww. But so now we've got Force Manual Davion coming out, and then
yes,
Mercenaries and Karita roughly behind them. So what all is in these from I don't want to say the horse's mouth because I just used that reference, but from one of the main people involved in it? Like, why? I don't want to say sell me this product. I'm already getting it, but for the people that don't know what these are, they aren't like Warhammer 40,000 codexes, but also they are a good book with your faction and things to do with it.
Yep. So the Force Manual series, the main line, is going to cover the late Succession Wars to late Clan Invasion. So the 3020s to 3050s.
Those are good years. Good years.
Yes. So it's going to start off giving you the background history of that faction. So hopefully by the time you've read the opening chapter, you know that Davion is the best house and they're fighting for the liberation of the rest of the inner sphere from everything. We actually had some comments earlier. People in editing were like, "These are a little biased." I'm like, we want them to be slightly biased.
It's like
the point of them is to convince the player to play this faction, so we want them slightly biased. We don't want them memes, but they should talk about some of the good things about the faction, which works great until you get to House Kurita and the Ill Clan era, but or specifically it's more the Dark Age era. But so you get through the first chapter, there's opening fiction, and you'll know who House Davion is and how they feel about everybody else and what's important to them. And then we get through listing every brigade and regiment of House Davion. And it'll show the insignia in color. So you'll get the brigade insignia, the Davion Brigade of Guards, and then the Assault Guards will have their insignia. And there will be the force composition. They have a battle mech regiment. They have this many combat vehicle regiments and all that. They'll have the experience rating. This is an elite force. This is a veteran, whatever. And then special command abilities. They're good in the forests. They're good on the attack, whatever. They'll list those special command abilities. And one or more of the regiments will get a write-up telling you, I've been calling them the featured regiments.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll get a full write-up that tells you more about what makes them interesting, unique, or whatever. The rest will just have the rules. So it's fully playable, but it doesn't go into as depth for all of them. Like all the Davion guards, there's like 7 of them?
There's a bunch.
I don't want to count. Yeah. They all got featured units. They all got a write-up. But when we got to the March militias, we picked a couple to feature, not listing, not giving each of the March militias a full page, but the rules for creating the Kestrel March militia are in there, but they might not have a write-up. And then there are unique characters, sort of like the pilot cards. They get a little more text, but it's a pilot with their mech and what skills and special pilot abilities they have. And most of the featured units have one. And then there's some in the back of the book that are faction-wide. So if you're building one of the March militias that didn't get featured and doesn't have their own unique pilot, there are choices for having a unique pilot for them. And then the part Matt's been working on is I was talking about the unit availability. So then we can actually go through and list what units House Davion has access to. And it's divided on the 3 eras: late Succession War, early Clan Invasion, and late Clan Invasion. And that's a bit of a change as well, because the master unit list says the Succession Wars go till 3049. And if something came out in 3048, we're going to list it in that era. And I changed it for these and said, if we're going to list something as belonging to the era, it needs to be available for most of the era.
Makes sense.
So if you use the force manuals to build a late Succession Wars Davion force, it should be playable in most of the late Succession Wars. So events happen in that, the late Succession Wars events are all the way up to 3049. But for these lists, I was like, it's generally pre-war of 3039. So if it came out new in 3039. Now for Kurita, we made a separate list because they had such changes in 3039 that we made a sub list for those units that get the Comstar, mistaken shipments, or whatever else they got, because that we couldn't have just ignored that. But Davion, it has whatever forces units they had to then.
That's good to hear that there's that level of effort being put in. Like Operation Rosebud, Comstar shipments changes the game so much that we need to change how the whole like Karita force operates, and like, I don't want to say faction rarities, but that's kind of the easy wording for that. So it's very good to hear that like that level of attention is being paid.
Yep. Matt is doing an excellent job there.
Good job, Matt.
And then, what can I say? There's a rules section that has, I think for Davion, I don't think, there are some new formations that are in classic BattleTech and campaign operations, but are not in Alpha Strike rulebook. So they'll be new to Alpha Strike in the sense that those rules have not been published for Alpha Strike before. The Rifle Lance, what's the Light Fire Lance is the other Davion one. And that was because of historical reasons. The Alpha Strike Commander's Edition came out while the combat manuals, we still had hope they were going to continue. By campaigned operations came out, we're like, yeah, no, they're not happening. So some of the things that were planned for the series got put into campaign operations. But so people have heard of these before. There's even, I don't actually, those two don't have force packs yet. Yeah, there's a vehicle rifle lance coming in Mercenaries, isn't there?
I believe so.
Yeah. So the Alpha Strike rules will actually exist. So that's good.
So for these rules,
and then there's a section.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, so for these rules, so will this just be like, use this ability as outlined in campaign operations, or are these rules written and like the force manual is the one-stop shop where you're going to need for these?
For the new ones, it'll have, I think those are actually so similar that we put the rules for both in there. But anything that's like the Assault Lance that's already in those rule books isn't reprinted. Well, actually it is. We actually divided the availabilities by formation types.
Okay.
So there's a 2-page spread Assault Lance. And then it divides among the 3 eras for an Assault Lance and lists all the units that could be, well, not could be, suggested units that could be in an Assault Lance. So it actually has the rules at the top for what the Assault Lance has, those requirements. That's what I was thinking initially. We didn't put them in the rules book, but yeah, actually in that formation section, it has the rules for the requirements for an Assault Lance. Let's see, what else is there?
I know we have there's supposed to be a digital IL-Clan update for all of the force manuals when they come out, as they are only for those 3 eras. Something to make it for like modern BattleTech.
Yeah, the IL-Clan updates will follow. They won't be released at the same time.
Okay. That was wishful thinking originally.
Well, the idea is that after Force Manual Davion comes out, then the Force Manual Davion IL-Clan supplemental will come out. And that should come out before Force Manual Kurita comes out. So they will follow each other. We're talking about a couple months difference. But basically, it won't be the same day Force Manual Davion comes out.
Gotcha.
You'll immediately be able to get the IL-Clan supplemental. But yeah, those will actually, like, the availabilities will cover Civil War era, then Jihad. I think we're calling it Blackout, Dark Age, and then there'll be the IL-Clan era, something like that. But we'll only list regiments and brigades that still exist in the IL-Clan era.
Makes sense.
So you would be able to build a Civil War era of that regiment, but if that regiment was destroyed in the Jihad, it won't be listed in this book. So you won't be able to build a Civil War era force from that regiment because you're not here anymore.
They don't exist.
They don't make it.
It was nice knowing you. But yeah. Oh, but the other thing is that all the Force Manual series will show a painted miniature for every single paint scheme that faction uses.
That is
awesome.
fantastic.
Some of them are new. Have never even been described before.
Like
some of the
miniatures
academies,
or some paint schemes.
like the Goshen War Academy has never had. It has cadres, but they've never had a paint scheme. There's a couple others that are brand new in Force Manual Davion. But so, we'll have two, because the Davion Brigades of Guards have to have two different schemes. They have the flag scheme with the big stripes, and then the blue with the small stripes. So show each of those. And the Avalon Hussars need to have like a dozen, because each of them is gray with a different highlight color. So we had to show them all separately. So if it's different, there'll be a different mini showing each of them. I love those. From the first combat manuals, I printed off those pages to hang up. They just had all the miniatures on the multi-page spread. I love those. But between, and we're adding, there's going to be illustrations of the uniforms.
Oh my gosh.
So there's going to be the field and dress uniforms.
I know several people who will be excited for those. They like to dress up when they go to the conventions or the tournaments. They show up in their regalia, so I'm sure people will be excited to see those outfits.
It was one of the last editions. Like, the book was ready to go, and I don't know who
Stick
brought it up, but Ray was like, "Yeah, we'll hold the book. We're going to put uniforms in there."
I can say it was worth it, but why are the Force Manuals delayed? Well, we had to get field dress for all the units. Okay, I guess that was worth it. I'm not happy, but I'll accept it.
The book was delayed 3 months because there was an argument about whether they should be wearing black or charcoal gray pants.
Well, then Kirito was delayed because we realized we needed to do the Rosselhog uniform.
Oh my gosh.
So we knew at that point, yes, we needed the Kirito uniforms, but then we're like, wait a minute. We've got a special section in the Kirito book for the free Rosselhog.
So it's Kirito and friends, really.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're friends, Josh. Did you pay attention to how that played out?
I skipped that day in my BattleTech history class.
Be careful when Josh calls you a friend. That's all I'm saying.
They're still around, right? Right? What was I going to say?
But yeah, I can't. Any day now, I'm still waiting to get the word that they have Force Manual Davion in the warehouse. People can start getting them, and we've waited years for this book.
Oh yeah. I think the original release was coming soon, 2016.
And it was written. The whole book was written. There was no art. There was no layout or anything, but the whole thing was written. And then it was like, oh, no, hold on to that.
So are the others written as well, and we're just waiting on art? Is that something we can expect, or are there other delays for other books?
Well, since we expanded the era, so they originally only covered to the early clan invasion. So, and then all the changes to how we do the availability, those have to be redone. So for Kirito and Mercenaries, there was some additional writing that had to be done. All the art's being redone for both those books. So even the combat manuals, those were the two that the combat manuals were released for, Kirito and Mercenaries. It's all new art, all new availabilities, and then all of them had to have any changes that happened in the second half of the 3050s added. So it also meant there were some new regiments that were created, some that were destroyed. So all that had to be updated. That's not what's holding it. It's the art and layout is what's going to hold it up. And then Matt doing all the work. We do have the next one after that is showing significant progress on writing. So they mentioned Invading Clans is going to be the next one.
Ooh.
After Mercenaries.
We're not like splitting out every. Let's get real. There's a lot of factions in BattleTech, especially in that era. So we're not going to split out like Clan Wolf gets its own book, and Clan Ghost Bear gets its own book. It's for that time period.
The plan
at least,
right now is it's going to be double the size of the house.
Okay.
So it'll be twice as many pages as Davion or Kurita. But the individual clans, the forces, were too small to have a separate book.
I mean, that tracks.
We thought about splitting it and putting half in one book and then having a volume 2 with the other half. But right now we're proceeding with all of them are going to go into one big book. And it's going to be fun because we haven't started on the Ill Clan supplemental for it, but then we completely changed which clans we're talking about. So it's now Hell's Horses, not Steel Vipers, so that's going to have a lot of more changes. But so Invading Clans is more than halfway written.
Okay.
I want to say it's even more than 3/4 of the way written. And they just started assigning art. We've actually got the first draft of the cover came in.
Ooh.
I have so many questions I want to ask that I'm sure you can't tell me anything about.
Like what? At least give me the chance to say no.
Most of them revolve around certain bird clans, but no, I'd be curious to see what's coming in that book. That I'm a predominantly clan player, so that really interests me.
It has been interesting how many gaps there are in the clans among the 3050s that canon has not covered.
Sounds like an excuse for more lore. More books.
Well, it has to be. I mean, we have what's the example? Well, one is what was going on with the Smoke Jaguar galaxies on Luthien that had completely different galaxies than ever existed before or after. There's been wolf clusters that show up in a book and then disappear, like a novel, and then disappear. There's been a lot more questions in it than I thought originally going into it. Like I knew about the Smoke Jaguars. The wolves have had actually more questions than I expected there to be.
Fascinating.
The Refusal War era in particular was very changes were happening very quickly, and you just get a hint of something and then all of a sudden it's gone and you're like, did they change? Did they become something else? Were they wiped out? What happened to them?
Yeah, I think I try to go to that Sarna page every year and I'm like, do I understand this still? Nope. Move on.
Well, and the Smoke Jaguars never had a field manual because I didn't survive till the field manual series. So
not many people.
They did not. So they did not get a lot of information that was added in those field manuals that everybody else has.
Yeah. Oh, what was I going to say? So I guess my big questions are, is this like we're planning to do like 2 force manuals a year, maybe 3? Like I know a lot of people are going to, of course, be like, well, I play Merrick, and that's not a very important faction, like a not headliner. So of course we're not going to lead with that. But I guess like, is the goal of the pipeline like to get as many out within 1 year or 2 years, and then like 3 or something else?
Oh, come on, you know Catalyst.
I know.
Production plans.
I know.
Josh, you're asking questions you don't want to know the answer to.
I mean, the general idea is we're trying to just keep this a regular production line going. So,
because that's good, because
I've already got
it dropped off after 2, and I think everyone was like, we would be at far like this Fire Mandrill one if we were still doing it to this day. And it's like, oh, okay, you finally got yours after 6 years. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's like,
but we have, like, Matt is sitting there working on faction. When he finishes one faction, he's on to the next one. The people doing the Dave Fanjoy is doing the camo specs miniatures, and when he finishes one, he's like, where's the list for the next one? So we're just trying to keep people continually working on these. The artists are actually going through a progression. Spooky did almost all the illustrations for Davion, and then Marco did almost all the Curita illustrations. And I know who the cover for Mercenaries, I think, is by Eldon. I'm not sure. I've seen the cover. I can't remember who did it. I haven't seen the rest of the illustrations, so I don't know if he's doing all of them yet. But art has a bigger demand for everybody wants art for all their books. So I can't keep one person just doing Force Manual art. Somebody will grab them away.
I'm sorry, I want my pretty pictures.
Oh, that's the best part of being the product developer on the book is somebody goes, okay, here's the art coming in. I was like, yes, this is why I worked on this book, so I could get the art first.
Perks of the job.
Actually, I bought a digital picture frame that's over my computer that just rotates through all the upcoming art.
That,
because I got tired of printing and throwing away art when I can't fit it on around my desk anymore.
I'll take it. Like, I'm relatively local. You don't need to throw it away. Or just, give me the address of your dumpster. That's okay. That's fine.
But yeah, we already have somebody assigned to write the one that's coming after Invading Clans. So the writing, it usually comes first. Partially because then we also have a list of, now we have the list of what all we need. We need all of these regiments, insignia, and all that stuff. But trying to keep everybody rolling. So we do have, we have plans to do everything.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear.
We definitely do not want to exclude Merrick or Lio or Steiner. Yeah. So we're going to keep doing this, and I'm glad they announced that we're doing the Invading Clans, because initially they just listed the 3 and said, basically, we'll see how sales go. So the fact that we've already not only started on, but we've announced, we're going to do the next one after that, the Invading Clans. I think, if you looked at I know you did, because you did the podcast on it about the Adepticon Force Pack releases. Those are tied in to the Force Manuals, some of them, the faction ones. So, meteors can still fall from the sky and change plans, or, maybe just the breeze flows the other direction, depending on.
Yeah.
But the plan is we put a production pipeline into place, that we have people that do this, and that's what they do for most of these, so that we can keep going. We knew ahead of time that we make one book and then people are done. We needed to find out who was going to be doing this role, and they're going to be doing it for a while.
No, that sounds great. And I'm just so happy to hear that it's all coming together.
Yeah. We need to get all that purple. We need a purple book.
I know Dustin will be happy about that, and Denim with his Karita book. But Denim's going to get all of them, so
he's going to buy it all anyway. It doesn't matter.
Buy it all anyways. I literally have that as a soundbite.
My best part of it, this was my major contribution, is I made them put the faction emblems on the spine.
Oh,
Beautiful.
oh, that's gonna look so good on a bookshelf.
Exactly. That's what I needed.
I love that I've come away with this. Like, what's Josh's, favorite parts of, Alpha Strike, Mass Unit List, Force Man is like, no, he's got a little signature, like he did that. And you look at it every day and you don't even realize that it's what brings you the most joy.
And I didn't even do it. We actually, Mark Hayden's doing layout for the Force manuals instead of deck. But so he had to do the actual work of putting it on the spine, but I requested it.
Yeah. You specifically requested it.
Yeah, that cover came in and people were talking about, where the title needs to go and what color the title needs to be in. And I said, and we need the Federated Suns right there on the spine.
Oh, it's so good. It feels right. It's like, yeah, no, it's perfect. Flawless. Putting a bow on top. That's what it is.
Exactly.
Well,
I mean, that's probably like 10% of the sales are going to be because of that.
Should ask Catalyst for a raise.
I mean, saw his work on Alpha Strike, Master Unit List, and Force Manuals. I mean, and you do so much more besides that. Is there any?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't remember now.
I don't want to keep you forever, but is there anything else out of anything that we did mention or didn't mention that you want to touch back on? Anyone you want to thank? Like anything else that you want the listeners to know that you are aware of or thinking about or involved in?
Hopefully I'll get out more. That's been a plan for a while. Get see more people playing. Yeah, I mean, the hard part is just listing all the people that have contributed to all this, because especially as a product manager, I'm basically middle management now. So
it's terrible, isn't it? It's terrible.
It's like, yeah, I get told what to do, but I'm telling other people what to do more and more instead of doing it myself. And it is a weird feeling, but there's so many people that contribute to these now that I think I've mentioned Matt enough, but that's because I'm going to get after this. After this, I got to go pester him about the next one. But Jeff Swift wrote the first 3 Force manuals, and he was huge in defining what those are. And I still don't know why Ray asked me to do this, but thanks to him. He actually asked me to do the Battle of Tokyo. We started talking about it, and I literally have no idea why we started talking about it. Like, he just called me up one day and said, I want to do a campaign book. It's like, oh, I do too. Yeah. But Alpha Strike, nah. Yeah. I'm so glad so many. It's amazing how much it's grown. It seems like a much shorter time than it has been, because it's changed so much from where it was. But yeah, I think, basically we're just going to keep improving things. We like where things are. We just need to make them better. More support and clearing up things, and feel free to ping me on Discord with rules questions, and I'll answer them most of the time.
Oh, that sounds great. And, keep up all the great work. And I know I'm not speaking just for myself, but I know a lot of folks, at least over by me, we really appreciate all the work that you do and all the effort you've put into it, because you've created a product that we spend an awful lot of time doing. So we enjoy it. So thank you.
We couldn't have fun without you doing what you do.
Well, and it's so much great, because I've talked about before with, particularly with BattleTech, you put out a book, and there's going to be a certain number of people that are going to buy it because they buy every BattleTech book. And there's going to be people that buy it because they just want to know what's in it. They're looking for something new, but they're not necessarily going to play it. And like, the real to me, the real defining success is when people are actively using it, and they come, So when I get those rules questions, I'm like, yeah, that person's actually played it, because otherwise they would not be bugging me about this. With the master unit list, like when we originally started it, a lot of it was like, this is just so people can argue on the forums about why didn't my faction get this? But then when we have something like Southern Assault where they're using the master unit list, I mean, it's not that I want to run around telling everybody they have to be master unit list compliant for their BattleTech games, but I don't want to go through this work and not have people actually use it. I don't want to be there just so that people can argue about, did you give the Davion guards better special command abilities than who should we pick on? The sort of like, I want people to actually play it. So that I love when I get rules questions, because that means people are actually playing. I made something that people actually want to play, and the fact that this many people are still playing it for this long is awesome. And I hope, future books continue to do that.
Oh, that's awesome. And I will say I find myself just rereading like the Alpha Strike rulebook just to see if I've missed anything, because you can tell a lot of love went into it, like every revision, every errata, that it's meant to be enjoyed and played. It's not just it's definitely grown from what it has been or started as.
Next, I got to start deleting things.
Now make it smaller.
I used to have a quote, Stephen. I have a small playtest group, and I keep joking every time we bring up something wrong with the rules or confusing. I'm like, well, I'll just delete it. If it's causing confusion, we don't need it. Just get rid of it. And so he wrote me this grandiose, like, about how I was the Grim Reaper and bringing my scythe to the rule book. And I was like, yes, that is what I'm doing. Alpha Strike is supposed to be a cleaner game. And I really want to do more of that. And like artillery, it just needs to be cleaned up. Too much confusion. We'll get it there.
Looking forward to it.
Well, Josh, I'd like to personally thank you for coming on to the Mech Bay podcast to talk with us about everything and still not enough. Like, I feel like I could have you on again and cover everything else and still have room to talk about your mark on BattleTech. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm just glad North Carolina is taking over BattleTech like it's supposed to.
It's weird, right?
It is.
I was like, oh, I guess I like it here. Why? Because there's so much BattleTech.
It's awesome.
Yes.
Steve is awesome too, but
Steve is awesome.
Me, Steve, or you're Steve that you playtest with? I don't know which Steve you're talking about.
I was referring to you.
Oh, well, that's kind of you to say.
Neither of you are from North Carolina, but it's cool to go from, hey, can't find BattleTech anywhere, to like, wait a minute, there's people all around me, and they're the Mech Bay.
It's weird to be at the same store and just be like, hey, that's Josh. And I was like, oh, I'm also named Josh. And it's like, no, that's Josh, the guy who writes the rule book, Josh. And I was like, I feel inadequate now. But now we will have to get another game in, because it's been a while since I played against you. That Alpha Strike game. So I will make it my goal this year to get out more and play you as well.
And I need to play Steve, so I learned how to win.
I'll have to come down and show you some stuff, or you can come up. You're welcome to Detroit anytime.
All right. Steve, you wanted to sign us out?
Sure, I'd love to. To get more of all that great Mech Bay goodness, look us up on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. Join in the conversation on the MechBay Discord or send your hate mail to the mechbaypodcast@gmail.com. Remember, the phrase, "it's better to ask forgiveness than permission," does not apply when it comes to talking with the legal department.